Welcome to the Confidence Through Health podcast. My name is Jerry Snyder. As a health, wellness, and sports performance coach, my goal each week is to bring you experts to help you take control of your health and build your self-confidence. Thanks for including me today on your journey to better health. I'd like to thank our sponsor for this episode, All In Health and Wellness. If you're looking for a health coach, you're looking for a sports performance coach, you're looking for nutrition guidance, like for instance, a meal-by-meal plan that will help you understand how to eat. It will teach you how to eat, and it will give your body, your cells, the proper nutrition to feel great and be able to perform at your best, not just physically, but also emotionally and mentally. If you're looking for those things, you're looking for the key to improve your sports performance, both from a nutrition standpoint and an exercise physical standpoint and a mental standpoint as you approach your athletic event. All In Health and Wellness is able to help in these areas. Go to allinhealthandwellness.com and you'll find the contact information for how to get in touch with them and get started on the plan that will improve your life. So welcome, Dr. Andrew Hall, to the Confidence Through Health podcast.
Thank you for having me.
You're an expert in mental health, and I want to dive in a little bit, not too much, but a little bit into like, why is that such a passion for you? Like, what got you started on, this is where I want to impact people's lives?
So I have a Ph.D. in chemistry, and I spent the last 20 years studying naturally occurring compounds that have an effect on the central nervous system and the brain.
Right.
After the loss of my brother due to mental health issues, I've made it a personal mission to really help find natural alternatives to mental health and determine what the underlying cause is of these issues to help prevent it.
Right.
Respectively, about 22.8% of the US population suffers from mental health issues. And isn't that just really sad and, very, very sad and crazy?
It is. And so how much of that, one, I think everybody knows mental health issues, especially since the pandemic, have been either on the rise or at least identified more, right? Like whether they were there and just hidden or people just ignored them. But how much of that 22%, is that an increasing number?
It is increasing much more, or it's the prevalence of people being diagnosed. So I think as society grows, collectively, we are under so much pressure that if we don't take care of our mental health or address it, life is really just going to take you out. So
Right.
What are the tools that you put in place to really address that? I think it's a multi-prong approach.
Right. So how do you identify, like, if you're sitting at home and maybe other people can see your life and go like, oh my gosh, they've got some issues, the people you come in contact with on a regular basis, family, friends, but maybe you don't see those. Like, how do you identify, like, okay, things maybe aren't going the right way, I need some help?
I mean, I don't think it's easy to really identify for an individual from the outside. I mean, you look at Anthony Bourdain, you look at, Robin Williams,
Right.
all these people that were the happiest, jolliest people out there. It's very hard.
Yeah.
I think when individuals notice lifestyle changes, meaning they're not as social, not wanting to go out, a big criteria within the DSM and the PDQ-9, which is the score at which they measure depression, is, your ability to want to have joy. Do you get a joy from anything? And that's a lot of the issues that you are seeing. It's not just major depression as you don't want to wake up, you just have apathy towards everything. Nothing brings you joy anymore. Even if it's a big event, a marriage, a kid graduating school. And I think those are a lot of the issues that you see.
Yeah. And so when those things start to creep up, that's finding the right type of mental health help, right? The expert that can help you at that point. Because there's really, I'm sure there's more than this, but there's two main ways you can go, is the pharmaceutical way or the holistic way, right?
Correct. I think the brain is just so complex and there's so many neuronal pathways that pharmaceutical treatment might not be the best way to
Mhm.
take. In my personal view, treatment needs to take the form of multiple strategies.
Mhm.
So it's helping boost people's control of their lives to take
Yeah,
control and have leave a healthier lifestyle.
right,
This is diet, this is exercise, this is social scenes, checking in with your friends and family so you actually feel connection. I mean, a
right.
hug will go a great way.
Yeah,
Hugging your dog will go a great way. That's
yeah,
the happiest time when I get home is seeing my dog,
right.
and
Yep.
my wife, of course.
Yeah. Well, and that's something that like it comes back around every so often that I see this, this reminder that for a hug to really get like beneficial, it's like 20 seconds. Like you need to like really hug it out, right? Like, and not necessarily just like, in a not in a like in a I'm a scary pervert type of way, but like, okay, let's take a moment, let's really hug, let's like let our bodies connect, let's, and that can be with a pet too. My son, I see that all the time. He deals with ADHD, and there's times where he just grabs our dog and just like holds on, and we're like, okay, the dog wants to get away enough, but like, it's like it's that grounding force of somebody else that's helping your body reset, right?
I mean, we're humans. We're meant to have connections with
Mhm.
individuals. And to touch base on the pandemic, that exacerbated these situations where
Yeah,
people were in isolation, where they weren't having those physical connections. So,
right.
that is the underlying cause of, I think, a lot of the mental health issues. And I do think the limitations, if you look at healthcare practitioners and therapists,
Mhm.
the average session's about 29 minutes,
Yeah,
which is ineffective. You're not even getting a social connection with your therapist.
right.
So how do you address these issues or create those connections? And the
Mhm.
hug and personal connections can take so many different forms.
Right.
And a true connection is different, right?
Yeah,
Getting appreciation versus getting smoke blown, right?
right.
Or
Yep.
flattery, as you would speak,
Yep.
is
Yep.
totally different aspects towards life.
Right. Well, and the other piece of that, that average 29 minutes of connection with your therapist is that, to be able to then take that to the next level and say, okay, I need more, there's a big financial burden to that piece of it too, just the way our system works.
I think that's the main issue, right? How do you afford it?
Mhm.
How do you afford all these things within your lifestyle and still afford food with everything that's going on? Not
Right.
getting political with the economy, but
Sure.
it's
But yeah,
eating is
it's
more important than there. And if you look at socioeconomic issues, right? Lower class people that don't have access to these
right.
tennis clubs or
Yep.
running clubs or gyms tend to have higher prevalence of mental health issues. And it's
Right.
because of those situations, as you mentioned.
Right. Yeah. It's that social aspect that people miss out on. And then it's sometimes it's a burden that we just can't financially, but sometimes it's like you get to that point where you're okay, well, like you said, I don't want to leave the house, and so I'm not actively searching for a place to find connection.
And I think that's the rut that you need to have, the support to get through, right?
Mhm.
Once you get to that place, there's only so much, as I saw with my brother,
Yeah.
unfortunately, where he didn't leave.
Yeah.
You just saw him so withdrawn where all those connections were gone,
Yeah.
even with his family. We tried, but how do you push an individual to the next step?
Mhm.
It has to come from within.
Yeah.
And that's hard to do from an outside. And as a
Right.
therapist, they're limited in what they can do. They're not calling
Right.
every day to check in. So how do you have effective treatment in society is really the question. It's,
Mhm.
as we mentioned, it's a holistic approach
Right.
and
And then
people
from
doing it themselves. Sorry about that.
right, but from the chemistry side of it, right? Like, so what we're eating, what we're putting in our body, from the nutrition standpoint, and yeah, the political side of what's going on right now with attacking the food manufacturers for what's actually in some of the food. Um, that all messes with your brain chemistry and your brain function, right? And so like there's a piece of that when you change your diet to stuff that's healthier, you're not just physically helping your body, but you're mentally helping your brain function better, correct?
Absolutely. So studying natural products, right? There's a lot of
Mhm.
different chemistry within all the plants,
Right.
but the quality of these ingredients, what physically is in there, is going to help with the chemistry.
Yeah.
So you look at antioxidants. A blueberry is not just a blueberry. A good
Right.
quality blueberry has better antioxidants.
Yeah.
Um, and our brains are so complex that mood and behavior is governed by multiple different neuronal pathways.
Mhm.
You have things such as the dopamine pathways, the serotonin pathways, and NMDA pathways, which all have an effect on your mood. And
Mhm.
traditionally, pharmaceuticals have targeted one or the other. But my experience with natural products, as I call them, which
Mhm.
it's theirs, they all interact with these different pathways in a more holistic view to elevate the
Right.
chemistry within your brain.
Right.
Not that it's necessarily treating a disease, right? But it's
Yeah.
elevating your mood to be able to take control of your life. So if you're deficient in any of these, vitamins, if you're deficient in, dopamine levels naturally, like even if you have ADHD, these food and nutrition can really balance things out to move you to the next level,
Yeah.
and take control essentially, because
Yeah.
it's not a drug with nutrition or plants or holistic. It's about being able to be stimulated or supported to take control of your life.
Right. And I like the way you put that, because one of the things I like to tell people is that, when they ask me about sugar, for instance, like, okay, well, I'm not supposed to have sugar. And so I've even had people tell me that their doctors told them, like, you should not eat fruit because it's got sugar in it. And I'm like, well, it's different. Your body reacts differently to it, understands the compound, where it's coming from and what it's connected to, right? Like what's the whole piece that you're eating? And when the body recognizes it as real food, natural food versus something that was, put together in a manufacturing facility, stripped down and then put back together, right? Like your body recognizes the difference and it processes it in a more functional and efficient way, right?
Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of research now coming out about the gut-brain axis,
Hmm.
which is that communication.
Yeah.
Having a whole fruit, being able to process it over time instead of having these spikes. When you have
Right.
a spike in these sugar levels, it's causing spikes in dopamine levels. It's
Hmm.
creating an addiction pathway.
Right.
So how do you actually create the more holistic way towards eating?
Yeah.
Is really what it's all about.
Right.
And processed foods tend to have preservatives,
Hmm.
synthetic hormones, right? So
Yeah.
estrogen-based
Yeah.
compounds for preservatives, which do cause issues.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because it's those chemicals that are then messing up multiple functions in your body, but when they get to the brain specifically, because the brain's controlling so much of what's going on everywhere in your body. If your brain is, like, I don't want to say confused, but if it's backlogged with all these other things that it's trying to take care of itself, how would we think that our body would function well?
It's true, right? How do you have the nutrients, right? How do
Yeah.
you have drive the right function or provide the right material?
Yeah.
Even fish oil, right?
Right.
Fish oil, right? Everyone can buy a supplement that's fish oil. It's been clinically proven to help with depression, but
Right.
there's different grades. There's
Hmm.
DHA and EPA. So having the
Right.
right ratios, which has a lot to do with your actual brain
Right.
structure, is important. So
Yeah.
nothing's better than having fish, as
Right.
opposed to necessarily just taking the pill. Not that there is not good fish oil out there,
Sure.
but it's all about educating yourself and not just looking at a consumer brand, because it has
Right.
pretty packaging.
Right. Well,
Um,
and that goes back to, like, how, how close can you get something to its natural, state? If you're going to eat an apple if you can off the tree in your yard, or from the farmer's market, or, like, you want to trace it back that way versus eating dried apple slices that came from some processing plant somewhere that have a couple of other ingredients into them, because that makes them shelf stable for a year and a half.
And I think you hit the nail on the head. Us as society have evolved to think it was the best for society to, create these food systems,
Mhm.
where farm to table is honestly the best route.
Yeah.
And then I think you have well-intentioned scientists and
Mhm.
individuals that think they were helping out, but that has led to cause more issues downstream that they didn't
Yeah.
really think about.
Yeah. Well, and I think,
Hunting in your backyard, fresh meat always tastes better. Fresh
right,
fish after fishing always tastes better.
right.
Um,
Well, and I think that piece of society of part of it is we always want more, right? Like, or if we find out that somebody has something like, you know, this fruit that came and like everybody's talking about this fruit, but it's only found in Argentina, for instance. And it's like, okay, well, I want some of that fruit. Like, how can I get some of it? And manufacturers start hearing that and going like, okay, well, if we take the fruit, put it in this, we can add to it, the flavor, and it starts processing it down. They're not, I don't think any of them were necessarily going like, ooh, this is how we can mess up society. But it was, how can we provide something for people in finding out like, okay, well, it doesn't last long enough. We have to put preservatives in it. We have to put this in it to make it last long enough to get it from here to there. Um, in and then once the snowball started, it got to where it's a bit out of control.
Absolutely. I mean, why are your peach cups grown in Peru,
Right.
sent to China for packaging, and then sent back to the United States? It
Yeah.
just does not make sense. Or why can you buy strawberries all year round? These things are just
Right.
not natural.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the way society evolved.
Right.
It's
Right.
people want things now. It's trendy, like sea moss that I don't think is that healthy for you, but
Right.
it's a trendy ingredient.
Right.
Um, so it's really it's sad, but it's how do you align everyone with the right educated decisions for what's best for
Right.
them, right?
Right.
I don't
Yeah.
think I don't think having a cookie every once in a while is necessarily the worst, but if
Yeah.
you're having Oreos every day,
Right.
that's the issue.
Right. And that's where we've got to understand that balance piece because there are things that are going to give us that dopamine hit immediately. And when we start having, mental health issues start creeping in, whether it's anxiety or depression or whatever it is that we just that that in the moment is more situational than chronic or a real bad issue that we have to really look at long term. But when we're feeding it with something that's got chemicals and preservatives and things that our body has to spend extra time trying to get rid of just to get that extra dopamine hit to go like, okay, now I feel better again. Like that's the cycle that from a more than anything, like from a disciplinary standpoint, we have to be disciplined and to avoid that cycle, right? Not that we can't have
Abs-
cookies every now and then. We just have to make sure we get them at the right point for our mental health.
I think that goes for absolutely everything, not
Yeah.
instant gratification, having to work for everything and being disciplined about everything is really the
Yeah.
key to success.
Yeah.
Emotional resilience, right? Emotional
Mhm.
regulation to be able to have control will make things more gratifying as opposed
Yeah.
to instant gratification for anything, whether that's food or social
Mhm.
media, that causes most of these issues. And when we
Yeah.
talk about dopamine, it's not just food, it's
Right.
all these other aspects to our lives.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean the cell phone, right? Like people get so that you don't realize the high you're getting from people liking your posts or just finding different things and there's one piece of it where I sort of I laugh literally because it's like, okay, well, most adults don't laugh enough, and so we're seeing funny stuff, we're laughing more, you know, but it's the we're disconnected from it, right? It's a different kind of emotional response as if we were having a conversation with somebody and laughing because of the conversation with the person, in
Is
real
it a
time.
genuine response? But,
Right. Yeah.
you see so many people out in a social gathering on their phones.
Hmm.
I mean, concerts when I was younger, everyone just has their phone out instead of enjoying the moment.
Yep.
It's wild. I went
Yeah.
to Yellowstone this past summer, and
Hmm.
the geyser, everyone had their phone out. I didn't see
Yeah.
one person actually looking at the geyser, and that's natural beauty.
Right.
That's where I'm happy. My phone's off. I'm
Yeah.
disconnected.
Yeah.
That's really where you have your true happiness, for me at least.
Right. Right.
And to touch upon that social media too, it's creating this habit and these dopamine issues where people think everyone has it, right? It's
Hmm.
all this fake lifestyles,
Right.
rented cars,
Yeah.
where it's causing issues.
Yeah. And that's it is feeding back a little bit to that, I wish I had that. I want that comparison piece. And that drives more negative mental health issues, right? Like if you're already dealing with depression because maybe life hit you hard, and so maybe you lost your job, or you're going through relationship issues or whatever, and then to stack on top of that, everybody you see on social media has apparently the best job and best life and the best house and all the things. Like it's not a natural, because obviously that a lot of that is not true. And so you're
Most of it's
feeding,
not true.
right, you're feeding a depressive state with stuff that's made up.
Hmm. And I think that's really the issue we have. I mean, I was in Nigeria this past year, working for a medical device company, for a urine-based malaria test,
Mhm.
and the socioeconomic situation you can imagine is quite poor.
Yeah.
But for me, what blew my mind, how happy everyone was with so little.
Mhm.
Where in the United States, we take all these things for granted. We
Yeah.
don't think we have enough, but we do have enough. It's all about your
Yeah.
perception of what is enough. And you
Right.
look at these billionaires or Elon Musk, they're probably not as happy as you think.
Right.
They're working too many hours and
Hmm.
probably not enjoying everything that you see on this social media or these
Right.
posts,
Yeah.
um, in
Yeah.
life.
Well, and that's one of the things that I always remind people of, is like, look at those people like Steve Jobs that, they had everything, top of the world, could buy anything he wanted, you know, um, died earlier than he probably should have. And at the end, what is he talking about? Like, oh, he missed out on relationships, right? He's not talking about, I wish I would have worked extra, to get a little bit more money, or so I could have had that car, or, it's all the people that they're always talking about. Oh, it's the time spent, right? What did I sacrifice in that time spent? And I think that's one of those things that's can be a spiral when they talk about mental health, right? Because we spiral and we lose track of time, and all of a sudden 3 weeks go by or 6 months go by, and we haven't done anything because we're stuck in that moment of, whether it's depression or anxiety or whatever is driving us to not get out and do those things.
I totally agree. That's the issue. It's going through the spirals, not taking charge of what's going on, being grounded, being mindful, and
Mhm.
being content with where you're at, and to move forward. I mean,
Yeah.
life is tough.
Right.
So if you don't have the mental fortitude, it's going to take you out. So what tools do you put in place to
Mhm.
really drive those situations? And to touch base upon, Steve Jobs, all the mansions. I mean, you look at someone like Warren Buffett.
Mhm.
Same house since 1960, a small
Right.
$300,000 home.
Yep.
I don't know how happy he is, but he actually seems truly happy,
Yeah.
when you look at everything he does.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and yeah, Sam Walton drove the same pickup for, decades,
yeah,
and so it's like, you know, like understanding, I think, and that's, it takes us, we have to take a step back, right? And go like, okay, what do I really want? What really makes me happy? Me, myself, not in comparison to whatever everybody else is doing, right?
what truly makes me happy? Is it hiking? You don't need anything. You don't need money. You just need a pair of shoes.
Right.
And to touch base upon what you said earlier, you just see repetitive cycles of very successful men that regret not spending time with their children as they're growing up. They're trying to work. Yes, you do need to provide. So
Sure.
it is a balance. It's life stinks in that standpoint,
Hmm.
but where's the balance between what's good enough and then also setting your children up with the right expectations, right? I
Right.
have a lot of um, a lot of wealthy friends that grew up in a wealthy neighborhood, they seem more depressed than I think people that grew up with a lot less,
Yeah.
which is ironic to me. You think having things makes you more happy, but my view has been actually the absolute opposite of that,
Yeah.
um, which is interesting, which is sad. I mean, frankly,
It
it's
is, but
sad.
it is interesting. Is and it like you said, it's a balance of understanding how much is enough because yeah, we live in a society where there's bills and there's I mean there's just certain things you have to whether like not everybody needs the $1,200 latest phone, right? But if you're working in a position you need a phone, like you have to have some sort of phone, right? So there's bills to pay. Um, but understanding like, yeah, what is enough, and then how do I spend that time that I need to spend on my health, right? Because we seem to push that to be last on the list.
Absolutely. It's carving out the time. Everybody pushes it off, right?
Mhm.
But when you talk about even mental health, just exercise cardio, right?
Mhm.
Cardio regrows the neurons. So you have something called neuroplasticity, the
Mhm.
regrowing of different neuronal networks. People want to talk, and pharmaceuticals are trying to find new drugs to be able to create these new pathways.
Right.
But some of the best way to do that is through cardiovascular
Mhm.
exercise, not just lifting heavy weights. I think that has its own benefits as well.
Sure.
Um, but literature indicates that that is one of the most impactful things to your life. And you see a lot of athletes go to the gym, not to be necessarily fit,
Mhm.
but it's for their mental health. And
Right.
science now backs up that reason.
Yeah. Well, and that's like one of the one of the big things that my wife sees because I'm a runner. I run long distance, and so it's typically I'll average anywhere from for throughout the year I'll average anywhere from 40 to 50 miles a week that I run. Um, Sometimes it's a lot more than that. Sometimes it's less. But I got injured this past spring, and so I had to take 9 weeks off where I couldn't run at all. It's Achilles injury, and the first week to 10 days before I finally was able to like get a good reset and find other things. My wife was like, "You're driving us all nuts. Like my mental health was all over the place, right? Like because I didn't have that reset, I didn't have that restructure, and it was like, and I could tell. I mean, I knew it. I was like, I don't know what to do. I'm trying. I'm like, I'm making sure I'm eating right. I'm making sure I'm getting, the right levels of all the vitamins that and it's just like you can't replace some things. You have to learn to live without them if you can't do them, right? Like, so I couldn't run, so I had to learn to live without it and find other ways to get that mental health relaxation piece.
I hope it wasn't social media. Just kidding.
No,
Um,
no.
Uh, no, but it really is true. It's finding the outlets, being able to adapt, right?
Yep.
And that is the issue, right?
Yeah.
How do you adapt? How do you recognize those things? I think earlier on you mentioned when do you recognize these things?
Mhm.
It's being mindful. So knowing where
Yeah.
you are at in a specific state, right?
Right.
I think everyone is situationally depressed, having a bad day. And
Sure.
that's not necessarily depression, it's being having emotions, right?
Right.
So how do you regulate them? How do you keep emotional regulation? I think it's when I have a kid, it's going to be the biggest tool that I want to teach him, right? How
Right.
do you have
Yep.
emotional regulation? Because that
Yep.
will be the greatest thing you can teach anybody.
Yeah. Well, and that is it's because most of the time, the bad things that happen to us that put us in that negative depressive state throughout the day are very situational and typically like less than 2, 3 minutes.
Temporary, right?
Yeah, it's an extremely temporary piece, but we get fixated on it, right? And it ruins the whole day.
And I wish I knew now what I knew when I was 21, right?
Yep.
Because it does take a lifetime to learn these tools. So the earlier
Right.
on you have it, the more successful you can be, the
Mhm.
better connections you can have with people, and you don't sweat the small stuff.
Right.
And then the big stuff doesn't become a problem either.
Right. because your brain chemistry, like from a chemistry standpoint, your brain, like, yeah, you if you feel that emotion, you're going to put off different hormones, you're going to do different things that like that will change your brain chemistry in that temporary state, but it doesn't mean that it's like that way for moving forward, right? It'll
You can
once those
change, you
hormones
can
wear off,
train your
it
brain.
you
You
come
know, you
back
can
to it.
really, yeah, you can train your brain to do wonderful things.
Mhm.
And it's all about habits. It's
Yep.
all about thinking and being mindful. I keep using the word mindful. People
Yeah.
use it loosely, but it's being cognizant of what's going on, knowing that these things are temporary so that you can control the chemistry.
Right.
And your brain is a very powerful thing. The biggest remission rate for cancer is nuns because they have that mindset of that things are going to be okay, and
Right.
that's a lot of the rationale behind that.
Wow. Um, and it's one of like the connecting between the mind and the brain is like it's interesting because they can both control the other, right?
They do, and we don't know as much as everyone wants us to think we know. We
Right.
don't even know how these things really communicate.
Right.
There's multiple pathways.
Yeah.
All of them are intertwined, activating one another. And it's such a challenge. That's why it is such a challenge to understand,
Yeah.
really. And it's just trying things, throwing things around, I feel like, until you
Hmm.
see what sticks. And
Hmm.
everybody's so individualized.
Right.
Diet or genetics, so if you bring individuals from another country, their traditional diet and how they've evolved,
Hmm.
some of them will get sick when they come to the United States. It's just because
Sure.
of the way our food's made. They're not
Right.
used to this style of food,
Yeah.
vice versa.
Yeah.
Montezuma's Revenge if you go down to
Right.
Mexico, fortunately,
Yep.
you know.
Yep. Um, but and to like circle back to the nutrition piece of it, like what we provide nutrient wise, like helps it helps both change what's going on in the brain, but also balance it out if we eat good nutrition on a regular basis, right?
Absolutely. If you have good nutrition on a regular basis, you have the right amount of material. Material, I mean the right amount of vitamins for you,
Mhm.
because we are very different.
Yep.
There are a lot of things called adaptogens, other plant seasoning that you
Hmm.
use that has a lot of rich chemistry that helps regulate these systems. So it's all about having the right diet and the right food,
Hmm.
the right vitamins and, plants that will really create a homeostasis within your body so that you can
Right.
self-regulate.
Right. And
You
that's
know,
that regulation and or balancing pieces is really the biggest. That's where you want to spend most of your life, right? Like is in that like unbalanced, like I'll have ups and downs, like you talked about before. Like you don't want to have these huge peaks and valleys with dopamine hits, right? It's
that's
okay to
addiction.
have, right. It's okay to have ups and downs, but if we're spending most of our time in that balanced piece, then we become resilient, right? Like it's like, okay, well, things can happen, but we're gonna be okay.
Absolutely. So as long as you have the right chemistry, right, in your body, the right food, the right nutrition, not overindulging, right? Too much or too little of anything is bad. That's where you can become resilient.
Yeah,
You'll feel better.
yeah.
There's some days I forget my multivitamin, right?
Hmm.
Even though I do have the right food, I do supplement,
Sure.
and it's amazing how your mood will change with the right multivitamin.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of what I think we need to teach people, and not necessarily teach, but have people be cognizant of those sort of situations,
Right.
right?
Right.
Be aware, be
Right.
self-aware, be present to see what's going on within their day.
Mm.
Think about it. I'm having a bad day, or did I skip my multivitamin today? You
Right.
know,
Yeah. Um, so from a for that individualistic piece, right, in determining, because I think, yeah, I think we would all agree it'd be very simple and easy if we could just be like, I need this much vitamin A and this much vitamin B and this much, and everybody's all the same. So just go grab this one multivitamin that has everything for everybody. It's gonna be fine. Um, but we're not like that, right? So like,
we're
how do
not
we
like
know
that.
what we need?
So we go back to the original question about cost prohibitive nature,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
There is now nutrigenomics testing, right? So a $1,500 panel,
Yeah.
which will tell you what you're predetermined to be as far as nutrient deficiencies.
Hmm.
But the beauty of a lot of vitamins, there's water soluble, fat soluble, there's
Hmm.
other material. It's about having the right amount, and your body typically will get rid of some of that excess.
Right.
Fat soluble can be toxic, so I'm not trying to
Yeah.
recommend overdosing some of those things, but
Yeah.
your body is very resilient. It knows it can't produce something it doesn't have access to, but it
Right.
knows when it has enough. When you have enough vitamin B12, we all know what our urine looks like,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So these are all the situations that we need to take into account.
Yeah. Um, no, and that's a big piece I think that people like skip because they think, oh, I either I can't afford the testing or I don't know what testing to get or my doctor won't do it or but sometimes it's okay, well, just go grab the $30 multivitamin that gives you 2 months supply and start somewhere. And if it makes you feel
Starting is
better, great. If it doesn't make you feel better,
pick
that just
vitamin
wasn't the
D.
right one. Like,
Yeah. And I think
experiment around.
that's part of it, right? You need to empower people to take control of their lives. There are a
Mhm.
lot of brands, I'd like to say, right? Where they
Mhm.
are putting out different products, this sleep melatonin, right? You're
Right.
overdosing on melatonin. You're going to sleep well, but you're going to cause other downstream issues.
Sure.
But how do you got to at least try.
Yeah.
You can't be paralyzed, and it's better to take that affordable multivitamin that's within
Mhm.
your range, right?
Yeah.
Um, to actually try something and see how it works.
Yeah.
Most of the time, it will work. At least you're incorporating small incremental changes. And
Right.
I can't run 50 miles a week,
Yeah.
right? But I try to walk every day, and I do try to
Right.
run at least 2 to 3 times a week.
Yeah.
And that's at least something, right?
Right.
One day, hopefully, we can be running together. But
Well, I know I'm extreme. That's fine. But that's I think the biggest piece and is taking yourself and saying, okay, I'm going to try something to make myself better and being disciplined enough to stick to it, right? Like buying the multivitamins, putting them on the shelf, trying them for a couple of days and saying, no, it doesn't work, doesn't help. It's
yeah,
it's it's back to that discipline piece of like, okay, I'm going to do this every day to
try
see
it for 2 months,
what
see
the
how it is.
long-term
It's not an
outcome is. Yeah.
instant. And I think society has evolved with pharmaceuticals. They want an instant release, right? You mentioned ADHD, right? There is natural alternatives, not even
Sure.
just plant-based supplements. There's meditation. I meditate for
Mhm.
5 minutes in the morning.
Right.
All those little mindful practices can really help you out with how you focus, how you
Yeah.
approach things. When I started meditating, it was 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Now I'm up to 10, 15 minutes, but
Nice.
it started at 30 seconds.
Hmm.
Couldn't go any longer.
Yeah.
But it's all about implementing these things
Yeah.
and finding the right supplements. I think, like you said, it's individualized for everybody.
Yeah.
Whether or not it's a sleep med or whatever it is.
Hmm.
These are all different for individuals, but you got
Yeah.
to try somewhere.
Mhm.
And there is the placebo effect with some of these things, right?
Right.
So at least you're putting in effort and making incremental changes to your lifestyle to really help you out.
Yeah. So
At that
with
point, you recognize the issues, I'd like to say.
right. With your meditation, because I know that's exactly what a lot of people will say is like when it comes to meditation or just grounding or it's like, oh, I can't do it for that long. It just and forgetting the fact of like, okay, well, the first time you learned to walk, you couldn't just walk down the mall. Like you took 2 or 3 steps and fell on your face. It's like it is that slow progression to be able to get there. How much of well, and so no, with your meditation, like, is it just a fixed thing that you do at one time of the day to just set your day? Or do you often find yourselves going back to it at different times of the day, going like, I think I need to reset. I'm going to do a small
When I
little
started or
meditation
now?
Now.
So now I know when I got to have those different breathing exercises, take a break, and actually do those meditations. But it all
Yeah.
started with the YouTube, Google, ADHD for you, meditation for people with
Oh yeah.
ADHD, and it
Yeah.
was a 5 minute, meditation. And now I'm just mindful. My wife is practicing in it now
Yeah.
too, and it just makes a world of difference.
Yeah. And so it's again going back to understanding yourself and finding like, okay, now I know I'm off. I need to reset. And the faster you find out that you're off, the less that super high or super low is going to happen.
Absolutely. It's saying mindful too much. I apologize, but
No,
that's
yeah,
really what it is.
that's what it is.
It's recognizing of yourself. It's
Yeah.
knowing what's going on within your body, what situationally is going on.
Mhm.
Um, Life can be stressful, days can be stressful with who you're talking to. So how do you
Sure.
actually take this in and take that break so you can realign yourself?
Right. Um, so when like and this is I guess more for people with kids because I think from an adult standpoint, I think the answer is going to be pretty self-explanatory. But when should we start focusing on mental health?
As early on as possible, I think.
Yeah.
But I think it's like I mentioned earlier, I'm going to teach my child emotional regulation as early on as possible.
Yeah.
Because that's going to be able to teach them to be mindful of their emotions. It's
Mhm.
going to be more cognizant of your emotions.
Right.
And that'll set someone up for success because it's not saying that they have to do anything but do any specific path, right, in their
Mhm.
life, but they're going to be able to now take control of what's going on, take a step back, and move it forward.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't want to be a kid nowadays, right? All this
Right.
social media. I really would
Yeah.
not
I
want to
know.
be a kid with all this social media and, looking at university, you see everyone on their phone.
Mhm.
And I hate to say it, you see a lot of young kids, they hang out and they're just on their phone the entire time.
Right. Yeah.
Um, I'm used to playing manhunt when I was a kid, it's a totally different story.
Yeah. Um, but that's and that's one of the things that over the past several years as I've gotten more into the holistic side of health in understanding not just the physical health and like from a longevity standpoint, but also the bringing in that mental health side and going like, okay, well, it's 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 great if you want to live a long life, but if your mind is gone, that's really not great anymore, right? Nobody wants to be in that situation. And so teaching those things from an early age is really huge.
And Peter Attia talks about that quite a bit in his book. It's like lifespan versus longevity.
Yeah,
I don't want to be 70 years old and not being able to walk in a wheelchair. Take me out
yeah,
at that point. I hate to
right.
say that.
Yeah.
It's all about your lifestyle and how you can have an actual fulfilling life. So it's
Mhm.
it's taking these things into perspective,
Right. Right.
we go back to Anthony Bourdain and it's you think they have the lifestyle, but
Right.
it's what is truly making you happy. And it's
Right.
putting in these pillars and these foundations earlier on to make it easier.
Yeah.
Um, we couldn't run right away. We took one step at a time. So the earlier you are, the better training. It's
Right.
learning another language. It's easier to teach a child than it is to teach an adult.
Right. And that's sort of what we're doing is we're training the brain to do things provided we give the brain the right chemistry.
Right chemistry, right tools, where I think also society's evolved of this kid's wild, let's give him some Adderall, right?
Right.
Where
Yeah.
there can be easier fixes, which will be better long term. And you do
Yeah.
see society now, Europe starting to ban some of those medications.
Right.
For rightful reasons, right? They're a little
Yeah.
neurotoxic, but
Mhm.
so it's being able to provide the right foundation so that they can lead a fulfilling life. I don't think ADD is bad necessarily under the right circumstances.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
you look at dyslexia, Richard Branson, all these successful people.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it's the dub neurodivergent that everyone says now, but these are powerful tools to see the world differently.
Yeah.
And it's not fitting into this construct. It's giving someone the tools to live their best life, not
Right.
necessarily a life that someone pre put on them.
Right. Um, no, and I think that's a great way to put it is we need to focus on living our best life, not what everybody else is going for or living for or has. It's, and that's probably what you see when you go to third world countries is they're just they're just living their life, having a good day.
Content. They're content with what they have.
Mhm.
There's big communities of people, just those interconnections is what it's all about.
Yeah,
They're not thinking about everybody else. And
yeah,
I don't think about anybody else. Most people don't think about you.
right.
And I
Yeah,
think people have that misconception
yeah,
um, in life.
yep. Um, so how can we come alongside you, support you in what you're doing to help in this mental health world?
Just follow me on my journey, I guess.
Yeah,
I'm on a mission there.
yeah,
I do understand the regulations of not that I'm disagreeing, right? I do develop some botanical products, right,
mhm,
that are focused on some of those things.
right.
Um, but it's not right for everybody.
Yeah,
So I'm not being here on a sales pitch, but if you were
right.
finding yourself in those journeys, I do believe in it, being
Yeah,
an expert, and I did develop these products for seeing the unmet need of what individuals, what is out there, right?
yeah,
Not really focusing on there. So
right.
trying to develop an alternative treatment, but I don't think a botanical based
Mhm,
quality supplements right for everybody. There's
right.
better alternatives with food, nutrition, exercise.
Sure,
So,
sure.
um, but look at my publications. I'm going into clinical trials to show effectiveness of this come January, but
Cool.
it's looking at all this different research that's out there, and my goal is really to just help people at the end of the
Yeah.
day. So,
Well, and that's one of the things that you can do so much with food. And and I've talked about this before on a different episode, is it the the nutrient level in our soil is down. There's a lot of things that is just different from our food today than it was 100 years ago, 150 years ago. And so, yes, food should be natural food, should be whole food, should be our first choice to battle anything that's going on in the body. But a lot of times we need additional support to that, right? And that's really what we should look at supplements as, is like additional support to what we're already doing, as opposed to going to a pharmaceutical to just mask the issue and let it continue to grow.
that's how I view it, right? It's
Mhm.
how do you get that jump start? How do you put yourself in the right mindset to be able to now make these incremental changes?
Yeah,
I don't think medicine in general, you're not prescribed an antibiotic to take forever. You're taking it for the
sure.
regimen until it's over.
Yeah,
So the whole purpose is to help empower people to make the lifestyle changes
yeah,
necessary to take control.
yeah.
I mean, my brother's recently lost a lot of weight and his mood has changed a lot.
Oh yeah.
So I'm so proud of him,
Mhm.
seeing those things, but it's really about helping people, their mood. He's off antidepressants because of these things. I shouldn't
Yeah,
say that.
yeah,
I'm going to say it, but
yeah.
all these things really do make impact towards people's lives.
Right.
So,
Yeah,
after the loss of my brother, and just seeing individuals struggle in their day to day, that's the goal.
yeah,
And it's exercise, it's food, it's nutrition. Taking a walk and being outside and staring at the sun will be happy.
yeah,
Give your dog a hug.
yeah.
I mean, I do love my wife, but that guy's always smiling, right?
Right, right.
Sort of
Well,
situation.
one of them's always banging the door down to get you when you come home, right?
Yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah. So no, both my dogs do the same thing. They just scratch at the door. When I come
And they
home,
don't want anything. My wife doesn't
they
really
just,
want anything too.
yeah, they just want you to pet them and love them and hug them. Yep.
Yeah.
Um, and that's what life boils down to, is having our own understanding of what our body needs, right? Our pet, when we get home, it needs you to just let them know, I'm here, I love you, I'm there for you, right? They just like, okay, and then they'll go away. And they'll like, okay, go play outside or sit down or whatever. they're like, okay, I just
He
want to make
doesn't leave
sure,
my side, mine, but
oh yeah.
uh,
But and sometimes that's what I think, if we simplify our life to what we really need, a lot of these mental health issues can start to fade away.
I agree. I just remember in college, I had a big poster of, justification for education. It was the
Mhm.
Lamborghinis and all that, but I don't want them now.
Right.
I'm happy
Yep.
with my paid off car.
Right.
It takes me from A to B.
Yep.
And I see one of the richest individuals I ever met who's a mentor, has a 1984, Mercedes, right?
Yep.
Still picks up change off the ground. And I remember him
Right.
saying, I'll always remember what it's like to be broke, but he is the happiest guy I've ever met.
Yeah.
So it's all about your perspective and being content with what you have.
Yep. Yep. So, how can we follow you on social? What's your handle?
My Instagram is Dr. Hall's Health.
Okay.
And then you can find me on LinkedIn, Andrew Hall, PhD. So
Awesome. Awesome. So for that person that is struggling and doesn't think there's a way, and they're spiraling mental health wise, um, what's something that, not just for them, but maybe for the person that sees them, right? Their good friend, their family member that sees this happening. What's something that you would say is like, okay, here's my piece of advice.
it's reach out. It's just reach out, having the constant check-ins, not taking that no for an answer and just
Mhm.
constantly checking in, providing them the tools, forcing them out into
Right.
the public so that they can start seeing things from a different perspective. So
Awesome.
and seek a medical professional under
Right.
certain circumstances. So
Yeah.
there is medical intervention
Sure.
that obviously is needed in situations, but it's
Yeah.
all about providing the resources and tools. And just like we have to be persistent in our own mental health journeys, it's
Mhm.
being persistent with the ones you care about.
Right. And that's that. Yeah, I want to make sure people hear that pharmaceuticals are great for we've got to find a stopgap to stop this from happening. But how do we create that lifelong, balance in life is away from pharmaceuticals and more towards the natural products. So,
Cook them a meal that's well,
yep.
right? Invite them to
Yep.
the gym every single day. Eventually, they're going to say yes.
Right.
And don't give up. It's your gym
Yeah.
buddies, right?
Right.
Everybody doesn't want to go, but when you're accountable and
Yeah.
seeing the progress, that's where it's always really beneficial.
Yep. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for being a guest on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for checking out the Confidence Through Health podcast. Please subscribe, post a review, share this episode with those you love who need a little extra help with their health journey. Visit allinhealthandwellness.com to learn more about the coaching programs that I provide. All episodes are produced by the Social Media Cowboys, your source for all online marketing needs. Go to socialmediacowboys.com for more information.